I'm going to read another chapter of the Cathares out loud. This is chapter 1, Heresy and Orthodoxy. Catharism was the most popular heresy of the Middle Ages. Indeed, such was its success that the Catholic Church, and its apologists referred to it as the Great Heresy. As the 12th century turned into the 13th, it was at its zenith. Cathares could be found from Aragon to Flanders, from Naples to the Languedoc. Its equivalent of priests, the perfects, lived lives so conspicuously virtuous that even their enemies had to proclaim that they were indeed holy and good people. The Cathares found widespread support from all areas of society, from kings and counts to carpenters and weavers. Women, never welcomed by the Church, the Catholic Church, became Cathares, knowing they could earn respect and actively participate in the faith. Needless to say, this mixture of women, virtue and apostolic poverty, to say nothing of the Cathares Church's popularity, did not sit well with Rome. But nor did Rome sit well with the Cathares, who believed that the Church had, in its pursuit of worldly power, betrayed Christ's message. That Catholicism would move against the Cathares was hardly surprising. Indeed, in some areas in the south of France, Cathares were more numerous than Catholics. What shocked contemporaries was not that the Pope ordered a crusade to put the heresy down, but that the Crusaders committed atrocities of such magnitude that they are still echoing down the centuries. In the Languedoc, these crimes have never really been forgotten. Strangely, for all its popularity, the exact origins of Catharism are unknown. It emerged at a time when the Church and Europe as a whole were undergoing enormous changes prior to emerging into the so-called Renaissance of the 12th century. Although it is difficult to imagine the scale of atrocities such as Béziers, we can go some way to understanding the mindset of the Cathares persecutors by studying the history of the Church and how heresy emerged from it. Moreover, a study of the history of the dualist heresy, essentially the belief that the devil is as powerful as God, to which Catharism belongs, will help to set things in perspective. Like Catharism, dualism has murky beginnings. Dualism existed before Christianity and may even be older than recorded history itself. The term was first coined in 1700 by the English Orientalist Thomas Hyde to describe any religious system which held that God and the devil were two opposing co-eternal principles. The meaning of the term evolved to include any system that revolved around a central binary pairing, such as a mind-body split in the philosophy of Descartes, or the immortal soul, mortal body in the one of Plato. Dualists' strands exist in one form or another in all major religions, whether monotheistic, acknowledging one God such as Islam, Judaism and Christianity, polytheistic, acknowledging many gods such as Shintoism, some forms of Wicca, or the pantheon of classical Greece, or monotheistic, monistic, acknowledging that everything, the divine matter and humanity, is of one and the same essential substance, such as certain schools of Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and pantheism. For example, fundamentalist Christianity has a pronounced dualist slant, in that it sees many things in the world, rock music, drugs, New Age philosophies, Hollywood blockbusters, as being the work of the devil. Likewise, extremist Islamic groups see non-Muslims as either essentially asleep to the truth or actively engaged in undermining the religion of the Prophet. In both cases, an us and them mentality prevails, from which there is only one escape route: belief in Jesus and Mohammed, respectively. Despite these varying levels of dualism in the different faiths of the world, religious dualism proper stands apart in positing the notion of the two opposing principles of good and evil. Within the dualist tradition itself, there are generally held to be two schools of thoughts, absolute or radical dualism and mitigated or monarchian dualism. The Italian historian of religions, Ugo Bianchi, identified three distinct features of dualism. Absolute dualism regards the two principles of good and evil as co-eternal and equal, whereas mitigated dualism regards the evil principle as a secondary lesser power to the good principle. Absolute dualism sets the two principles as locked in combat for all eternity, and in many schools regards time as cyclical. Many absolute dualists therefore tend to believe in reincarnation, whilst mitigated dualism sees historical time as being finite. At the end of time, the evil principle will be defeated by the good. Absolute dualism sees the material world as intrinsically evil, but mitigated dualism regards creation as essentially good. So, the good religion, that's another paragraph. Zoroastrianism, not of Zorro the Conqueror, but Zorro meaning something else. We'll find out maybe. Zoroastrianism is usually held to be the first major world religion to espouse a dualistic view of the world. However, the dualism present in ancient Egyptian religion predates Zoroastrianism by some centuries, if not a millennium, the date of the founding of the Zorro being unknown. Polarities such as that of light and dark are frequently found in ancient Egyptian religious thought, perhaps the best known of them being the opposition of Horus, sometimes Osiris, and Seth, or Set. In the various versions of the myth that have survived, the two gods are portrayed as being constantly at war with one another, with Seth never being able to destroy Horus despite blinding him in one eye, but who himself is never quite annihilated either. They were known variously as the two gods, the two brothers and the two fighters. Although they weren't originally seen as good, Horus versus evil, Seth developed trickster-type attributes and was gradually demonized until his name was virtually anathema in Egyptian religious rituals and was effectively banished from the Egyptian pantheon. Right, so the Egyptians got rid of Seth, got rid of him. He wasn't much good, was he? No. As Seth, I don't know how you pronounce it. I'll call him Seth because Seth is difficult to pronounce. As Seth was gradually becoming depicted in ever darker colors, a dualist system that posited good against evil from its very outset was emerging in Persia. The prophet Zoroaster, also known as Zarathustra, was a great Persian religious reformer who founded what he called the good religion, or Zoroastrianism. The dates of his missions are unclear, and Zoroaster has been placed in various epochs, from 1400 BC to 1400, 1000 BC, or 1600 BC, before Christ. Well, I need to say that because I never know BC and AC and stuff. Okay, current research tends to suggest the middle dates, making Zoroastrianism the world's oldest revealed religion, a religion that has probably had more influence on mankind, directly and indirectly, than any other single faith. Right. Zoroaster was the first to teach the doctrines of an individual judgment, heaven and hell, the future resurrection of the body. Hello, Turkey. We'll have a pause. We'll look at Mrs. Turkey. Hello. Yes, I should be writing this letter. You're very right. I've not replied yet. Where's your little one? You've abandoned him over there, haven't you? Hello, duckling. You want to know about Zoroastrianism, don't you? Yes, the telephone is not water. Yes, this is not very comfortable, Joshi. It's like the cushion. Do you want some cushion? No? Oh, look, he's so cute. Oh, he's gorgeous, that little duck. Joshia, I'm not in your way, am I? Oh, you like the book, do you? Yes. Oh, hey, don't lose my page. Oops. There's this little duckling here. Can you see anything? I'm not sure what I'm holding there. Yes, this is the skirt, yes. Okay, shall we carry on with our reading now? We've got to have read one chapter by tonight. Very important. I'll leave Joshi a bit more room. There you are. You can sit here now, Joshi. Oh, she's gone now. Okay, where were we? Current research. Yes, the oldest religion. Zoroaster was the first to teach the doctrines of an individual judgment, heaven and hell, the future resurrection of the body, the general last judgment, and life everlasting for the reunited soul and body. All of these ideas were to influence Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Yet, where Zoroastrianism differs from these later religions is in its treatment of evil. In its traditional form, the faith holds that there is one good God, Ahura Mazda, the name meaning wise lord, under whom there are two equal twin forces of Spenta Mainyu, the beneficial or Holy Spirit, and Angra Mainyu, the hostile or destructive spirit. Just keeping an eye for crows and large birds of prey for the little duckling. Okay. The equal twin forces of Spenta Mainyu, the beneficent or Holy Spirit, and Angra Mainyu, the hostile or destructive spirit. Although Ahura Mazda's creation is good, the source of all evil within it is caused by Angra Mainyu, who is destined to be overcome at the end of historical time, at which point eternity will begin. So that goes back to the Egyptians who were saying that eventually Seth has been gotten rid of. So, yes, so it's similar, isn't it? We will get over the badness of it all, like the balance will just be all. We are balanced already, I know, but it's just a little bit in the extremes, don't you think? Okay. Classical Zoroastrianism, however, underwent changes as the fortunes of the Persian Empire rose and fell. Over time, Ahura Mazda became identified with Spenta Mainyu, reducing the original trinity to a binary pairing. The names of the Wise Lord and his adversary also underwent transformation, being contracted to Hormazd and Ahriman, respectively. By the time of the Achaemenid dynasty, 550 BC or so, Ahriman was no longer seen as being created by and inferior to Ormazd, but was now regarded as his equal. The world, the flesh, and the devil. Zorro, we'll call him Zorro, the Zoroastrianism. We have said that already, but because they were talking about it cleverly, I thought I better try and pronounce it right. So, Zorro in all its forms regarded the world as a battleground between the forces of good and evil, and each individual is expected to make their own choices as to which side to be on. This, together with the idea of the two principles, would later resurface in Catharism. Several of the concepts that developed before the Christian era would also help to shape the heresy. I wish they stopped calling it the heresy. It sounds like really judgmental. I'll have to look it up in the dictionary. So, where we read the heresy. Namely, so several of the concepts that developed before the Christian era would also help to shape the Catharism, namely the split between the body and soul, and the figure of the Judeo-Christian equivalent of Ahriman, Satan. The body-soul split, although perhaps today synonymous with Descartes, and modern empirical science, seems to have first emerged with the cult of Orpheus in the 6th century BC, which came to play an important part in the religious life of ancient Greece. Orphism contained elements of dualism within it, as a legendary figure of Orpheus was said to be either the son of Apollo or the Thracian king Oeagrus, who was of the dynasty founded by Dionysus. Apollo, the god of order and reason, traditionally stood opposite Dionysus, the god of intoxication and ecstasy. Oh, they've got a god for that. Of course they did. Yes. Oh, it's a bit different, that religion, isn't it? So the son of Apollo, dynasty founded by Dionysus. So Apollo, the god of order and reason, traditionally stood opposite Dionysus, the god of intoxication and ecstasy. But in Orphism and in later Zoroastrianism, neither god prevails over the other. Unlike Zorro, however, which regards the body as a material vehicle of the soul, Orphism regarded the soul as divine and immortal, while the body was its evil, mortal prison for the duration of its earthly existence. The origins of this belief derive from the story of the child Dionysus. As the son of Zeus, the boy incurred the jealousy of the Titans, the race of elder gods that Zeus had overthrown. The Titans tempted the child with a mirror, and while he was studying his own reflection, the Titans killed and dismembered the boy. I'm smiling because, just to be self-centered, it's what I'm doing. I'm looking at my own reflections in the videos. So maybe the Titans are going to come and get me in a minute, so we better beware. The Titan killed and dismembered the boy. Although Dionysus is later resurrected, Zeus destroys the Titans with a salvo of thunderbolts, and it is from the remains of the elder gods that humankind is born. The physical body was held to be made of titanic material and therefore evil, while the soul was formed of divine Dionysian material. Orphism developed practices whose focus was the fate of the soul in its afterlife, and the Orphic initiates hoped that by following these practices, their soul would be granted salvation in the next world and released from the bonds of matter and the cycle of death and rebirth. Oh, yes, she's still there. Okay, is that still recording? Oh, yes, it is. Sometimes you never know. Oh, it might stop. Okay. Satan was originally an accused angel in Hebrew thought, but had the good fortune, like Ahriman before him to be promoted. In the book of Job, the earliest Old Testament book in which he has a prominent role, Satan is one of the sons of God, who serves God in heaven. God asked Satan for a progress report on what he has been up to of late. Satan replies, says Mr. Toby. Satan replies, I have been walking here and there, roaming around the earth. Job 1.7. God asks Satan if he has noticed the devout Job, describing him as his most faithful servant. That's bound to be popular, isn't it? Satan wonders if Job would still serve God if he, Job, had everything taken away from him. God concedes the point and lets Satan descend to earth to begin testing Job. In a rapid sequence of calamities that could rightly be called Old Testament in their severity, Job has his donkey stolen by Sabeans, his sheep and shepherds are suddenly struck by lightning and killed a verse later, while in verse 17, Chaldeans make off with his camels. Before Job has time to react, another breathless servant comes running with news even worse. A storm has destroyed the house that Job's children were feasting in. All were killed. Job tears his clothes in grief, shaves his head, and from a position face down on the floor praises the Lord for taking that which he had originally given. Satan returns to heaven, and God points out to him that despite the fact that Satan has done its worst to Job, Job's faith is unshaken. God feels that he has won the toss. But Satan, not to be outdone by his employer, asks God if Job's faith will be as strong if his body were to be attacked. Once more, God allows Satan to test Job on the condition that he doesn't kill the poor man. This time, Satan causes sores to break out all over Job's body. Rather than seek around medical advice, Job decides to scrape at his sores with a piece of broken pottery. Once again, Job rejoices in his suffering, and Satan retires temporarily from the narrative. It's a bit strange to think how that's been good. So when you've got sores, you've got to scrape them with a piece of porcelain, and that makes you non-attackable by the Satans. Okay, right. Okay, where are we? So Satan plays the role of a trickster in the book of Job, albeit one of a rather cruel band. There is no doubt that he is still essentially a heavenly servant of some kind. If Satan is not actually doing God's bidding, then at least God seems content to let Satan get up to his tricks in the earthly realms. It's not until the second book of Chronicles, written sometime during the close of the Achaemenid period, which ended in 330 BC, that Satan steps out from the shadow of the Almighty to become a force set firmly against God and its creation. Satan does so in a rather interesting way, as he plays a role once taken by God himself in an earlier telling of the story. The story in question is of the census of the tribes of Israel, first recounted in the second book of Samuel, chapter 24. The Lord, being angry yet again with Israel, forces David to number her people. David's army, who are to do the actual counting, are none too happy, but comply with their king's command. After 9 months and 20 days in which they have been all over Israel, they return to Jerusalem, the census complete. At this point, David has a crisis of conscience and tells God that he feels that the census has been a terrible sin. Unfortunately for David and the people of Israel, God agrees. He gives David 3 choices to punish the sin: 3 years of famine, 3 months of running away from his enemies, or 3 days of pestilence throughout the land. David is unable to decide and casts himself at the mercy of his Lord. His Lord, however, is not as his most merciful and smites the land with 3 days' plague, in which 70,000 Israelites perish. When the story is retold in 2 Chronicles, however, it's Satan, not God, who urges David to take the census. It makes no difference. The results are, for the unfortunate Israelis, the same. Where's the turkey? Oh, she's just over there. Right. Quite why Satan went from being an accusing angel to emerging around the end of Achaemenid period as the adversary of both God and man is still something of a mystery. One possible explanation for this change is linked with the situation in Israel after the Babylonish captivity ended. It has been suggested that when the exiled tribes returned home, friction was generated between them and the tribes who had stayed. The exiles felt that it was they who were the true children of God, for they had remained true to the Torah and had suffered the punishment of exile to prove it. Matters came to a head in 168 BC when the Seleucid ruler of Israel, Seleucid must be maybe a kingdom there, King Antiochus Epiphanes, please excuse the pronunciation of all those names, till that ruler embarked on an anti-Semitic purge. Also, there was a king in Israel who decided to be anti-Semitic. Okay. Well, we'll stop there because there's a lot of barking. Oh dear. What will happen? What will happen next?